For decades, we thought we had it all figured out. We had a map, a tree of life, that sorted every living thing on Earth. But then, one discovery came along that just tore that map to shreds, forcing us to rethink everything. So, how do we make sense of all the life on our planet? Let's dive in.
All right, let's start with a question that sounds, well, just completely wrong. Are you, a human, more closely related to a mushroom growing on a log than one type of bacteria is to another? I know, it sounds impossible, but trust me, stick around, because the answer completely changed how we see the living world.
So, to even begin to tackle a question like that, we need a system, right? You can't make sense of the millions of species on this planet without some way to organize them. Otherwise, it's all just a jumbled mess.
And that is a long list of names. We currently know of about 1.5 million different species. And the crazy part? Scientists think there could be millions more, maybe up to 5 million that we haven't even found yet. So how in the world do we first try to get a handle on all this? For a long time, scientists had one big idea, one framework that was the go-to guide for charting all this diversity. It was the map that pretty much every biology student learned for decades. It was the standard.
And that map was the five-kingdom system. For a whole generation of researchers, this was it. This was the established, accepted truth of how all living things were connected.
It all started back in 1969. An American ecologist named Robert Whittaker came up with it. And you know what? It was a great system. It was logical, it made sense, and it really did define our understanding of biology for years. Okay, so here's the really important part of this old map. See that big split? Whittaker's system was mostly based on the cell's internal hardware. You had 4 kingdoms, that's us, animals, plants, fungi, and protists, where our cells all have a nucleus. We were the eukaryotes. And then, everything else, every single tiny organism that didn't have a nucleus just got lumped into one giant bucket called Monera. They were the prokaryotes. But here's the thing. That big catch-all kingdom, Monera, was hiding a secret. A deep, microscopic mystery that was about to blow this whole system wide open.
And this is where our main character enters the story, an American microbiologist named Carl Woese. Now, he wasn't looking at lions or giant redwoods. Nope, he was fascinated by the so-called simple stuff, all those bacteria and other microbes that everyone had tossed into Kingdom Monera.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. The old assumption was, hey, all these little guys without a nucleus, they're basically one big happy family. But when Woese actually looked at their genetics, the evidence he found was just shocking. He realized the life forms in Monera weren't one group at all. They were 2 totally separate groups, and they were as different from each other as you are from a tree.
And that is the crucial point here. This wasn't just a minor tweak. This discovery meant the entire 5-kingdom map was fundamentally flawed. It was time to throw it out and redraw the whole tree of life, right from the very roots. So fast forward to 1990. Woese drops a bombshell. He proposes that we need a whole new level of classification, a category even bigger and more fundamental than a kingdom. And he called it the domain.
He argued that all life, everything on this entire planet, actually sorts into one of 3 of these new domains. First, you have the bacteria. These are the ones we all kind of know about. Second, this totally new group he called the Archaea, which means the ancient ones. And third, the Eukarya, which is the group for absolutely everything with a nucleus in its cells.
So you can see how it all shakes out. That old kingdom, Monera, it got completely shattered. It was split into 2 entirely separate domains, bacteria and Archaea. And meanwhile, those other 4 kingdoms, the protists, fungi, plants, and animals, they all got grouped together into that 3rd domain, the Eukarya.
But this new map, this completely redrawn tree, led to maybe the most shocking conclusion of all, and it brings us right back to that crazy question I asked at the very beginning.
See, to figure out how these 3 new domains were really related, scientists had to go way back. They had to compare the genetic code, the deep molecular history of all 3 groups, to trace the family tree back to its original source.
And when they started piecing together this ancient story, they found a connection that, well, nobody saw coming.
They discovered that the Archaea, those ancient microbes that often live in really extreme places, actually share more deep, fundamental similarities in their genes with eukaryotes, with us, than they share with the other group of microbes, the bacteria.
Just let that sink in for a second. These two groups of tiny organisms, Archaea and bacteria, look almost identical under a microscope, but it turns out they're on totally different branches of the tree of life. And one of those branches happens to be our own.
And this right here is the punchline. So back to the question. Are a mushroom and a human more closely related than two different types of bacteria? The answer is a resounding yes. Because you, me, that mushroom, every animal and plant, we are all descendants of the Archaea line. In a very real genetic sense, we're all just a branch of the Archaea family tree that got really, really complex.
So what's the big lesson in all of this? It's that science is never finished. It's not just a collection of facts written in a textbook. It's a living process. New evidence can, and does, completely flip our understanding of the world. The tree of life isn't carved in stone. We're redrawing it all the time.
And that kind of leaves you with one last big question to chew on, doesn't it? The five-kingdom system was scientific fact for decades, and now it's history. So, what else do we think is settled science today that's just waiting for the next Carl Woese to come along and show us a whole new map?